All right. Hello, everyone. As always, our intention is to engage in a collaborative exploration of our economic systems and the tools necessary for a regenerative humanity. Last week, Tanuja continued the commons conversation, which has been going on for a few weeks now, and added the concept of human commons to the mix. And I thought that this was such a good graph. I wanted to just have us review it briefly, just to really continue, for me, becoming grounded in just what our shared responsibilities are on the planet, and in order to understand that better, to understand what it is that our days are truly filled with. And there are so many aspects of human-made commons, everything from the way we search information, the way we can in a second have a cooking recipe, interact with people, Facebook, YouTube, the Google search, culture in general. And Tanuja went further and talked about how are they controlled by and by whom. And I think that really starts to deepen our understanding of what we're involved in as humans in society. And, and then of course, our arena is the marketplace, the stock market, how money moves currently. And then the interesting one that Tanuja and I talked about during the week, and she had said really something that she was aiming for, which is the commons of our attention, and how does our collective attention move? How does it become captured? How does it shift? And this is one of the main things that brought me to this work in particular, is over the course of my adulthood, watching the collective consciousness and as it shifts, and how that is in fact what gives me hope that our collective consciousness and will be able to shift. And I've just begun reading hospicing modernity, and that they really speak to, yes, thank you, Lynn, that was a recommendation from Lynn, and hospice is my background, so it was a perfect mix, but he poses a question. Well, I'm listening to it, so it's a he. I'm not sure, is the author a woman?
Mm-hmm.
No, it is a man.
No.
A man. Okay. It posing the question of what if we save ourselves after near collapse? How is it that we did it? So this is the question that is up for all of us. And now, after yesterday's report from the United Nations, we're just it is just more and more in our face. And so to that end, I spend time poking around, and because there are lots of people traveling these roads, and we're not just traveling new roads, we're creating new roads. And I think all of our great minds are needed in order to figure this puppy out, man. So to ground it, I want to get back to our working definition of economy. This might be an earlier version, but it was so nice and tight. I went ahead and just recopied it into here. Economy is an organizational concept or tool that allows for the creation and movement of value. And I think that red circle is supposed to surround value. It's scooted somehow. It's the way that a community manages and meets their collective needs. And by community, we may in fact be talking about the human species community. And an economy supports the survival and thriving of the community. And Tanuja had written, these can be considered the first principles of economics. And I really like returning to this working definition. So this week, in homage to the idea that it's going to take a whole lot of us, I want us to take a look at some of the work that's already underway, if it can shed light on our conversation. And I've run across a couple of groups lately, but this is the one that I want to talk about today, R 3.0. And I'm not sure who might be familiar with them already. They're an evolving group, Berlin-based. They're open source. Everything that they put on their website, all of the white papers, all of their thoughts, you are welcome to take and use. And they've been around, as I said, since 2016, doing evolving themselves. And I ran across a presentation that Ralph Thurm, who's one of their management team, presented to the We All conference just last month in February in the Netherlands. And I noted their new focus is on the redesign of a new economic system for the resilience of social and ecological systems and the regeneration beyond a baseline of social thresholds, ecological thresholds, to actually thriving. And that is really what we are all about here, our conversation. So I looked at the presentation, and the whole deck is there. So I snagged a few of their slides that I thought were really good. It's well worth looking at if you get a chance, and we can put the link into the chat. So it's blueprinting the future we design, and so it's designing the future, and what is that going to be about? And of course, they really don't know either, but we're all working on it together. And I loved the way that they organized this slide, breaking it into, they're calling it the triple E failure, where the economic system's melting down, the ecological system is collapsing, and the education system is failing. And this list, you can read the list for yourself, but it is really a fairly comprehensive list of what we are facing. And I love good lists. And to me, this was a good list of what the world is dealing with. And in a way, I felt like it was moving the conversation a little bit further by capturing maybe not the root causes, but definitely some causes, and then also certainly the symptoms. And here are the effects that come from these three huge arenas of failure: pessimism, egoism, bigotry, narcissism, racism, inequality, wealth concentration, pandemics, epidemics, isolation, nationalism, social systems breakdown, tax and corruption. I mean, I think corruption is the piece that we're just seeing so clearly now, that is, we cannot trust our systems, that they are not, in fact, corrupt beyond being able to serve justice or equity. Human and labor disputes. I love this. Bullshit jobs. Yes, indeed. Plastic oceans, weather extremes, and territorial conflicts, all of which we are experiencing at global levels. So they go on to suggest that a fully regenerative and distributive economy, and that's an interesting word, distributive economy, and what are they really talking about here? It includes true costing, true benefiting, true pricing, true compensation, true taxation. And when I showed this to Tanuja, she said, well, what is the true cost? What are the true benefits? Exactly. What is true compensation? All of these concepts need to be revisited if we plan to work within the existing systems, which many people are still hoping for. I have been snagged by pessimism around that, I confess. But whether or not we have a new system or the existing system, these are the issues that we need to face. And so our discussion prompt really is, how do we begin to answer the questions regarding true cost, true benefits, true compensation, to name a few, because frankly, I think that what is going to ultimately allow change is to have a vision that is worth shifting to. And that when we have a vision worth shifting to, then the collective consciousness can work for us. So that's my presentation, and I open the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Pam, especially introducing us to R 3.0. I had seen them some time ago, but I have to say, I think I wasn't on my regenerative journey. I was very new, and so I didn't really understand, I think. So it's interesting that as we change and grow ourselves, what we are able to connect with changes. Yeah. But it's also interesting to me that they came along in 2016. So that's quite prescient, I would say, given it's pre-pandemic, right? And of course, it's in the middle of the climate change issue, but it's still, regeneration, I think, was quite new back then, 2016. The idea that we needed to go beyond sustainability was new back then. So, and I understand that their founder or one of their people presented to GRC, I think on March 1st-ish, something like that. And actually, I wasn't part of it, my fault. But maybe we could have some sort of discussion with them at some point, especially about the economy side of things, right? Or we could even have sort of a side panel. We'll bring in other thinkers thinking about a new economy, because there are quite a few now.
Yeah. There is so much going on, and it's very difficult to get a to wrap your brain around how much work is being done out there. But when I ran across them, and I've seen others, and weall.org is also in here, and next week I'm going to talk about weall.org, which is the Well-Being Alliance that did speak at GRC recently, and they are another group that are really moving this whole thing forward, whether or not it will ultimately be able to create the change we need. It all adds up. I think it just all adds up. Cabot, good morning. It's morning here in California.
Hi. I just I found something that I came across it just the other day, and there's a sentence in there: we are unable to change if we cannot find ourselves in a new version of the world. We must be able to see that who we are will be available in this new situation. So that's kind of following on your idea about vision, I think. And, another part of that is we have to start with where we're at, or in a conversation with someone, and we start with where we're at. We don't just immediately launch into what the new vision is, but we have to somehow relate it. So anyway, that's just a couple of things that came to mind while you were talking.
Yeah. That it is an interesting concept. I am personally deeply steeped 37 years in the 12-step program, and in the experience of recovery from addiction, which frankly I feel is a widespread disease in almost every arena of life, be it consumerism, food, you name it, the social media, the addiction to this addiction that is seems to be such an element of the human experience. There may be other ways to help alcoholics and drug addicts, but the way that I know to be best is when a bottom is hit, where there really is no option to continue on the path that you're on, where that just absolutely does not work. And you finally get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you become willing to embrace an entirely new way. And then the journey begins. And that has informed my whole life. I mean, no secret there. And I've seen it work so successfully for so many that I feel like there could be a kernel in that. And I've also seen where when an addict tries to maintain any element of their prior life, it really almost doesn't work. It rarely works when any element of the prior, stay out of slippery places, you change all, you gotta be willing to change completely in order to begin fresh. And I actually see that model overlaying the human condition really rather perfectly, but that's just me, and those are the glasses I look through. But every effort I've seen since, and I was a young activist in the 70s, every attempt gets co-opted by the existing system, and it gets whitewashed, greenwashed into, co-opted back into the existing system. And so that's just sort of my empirical observations over time. Lynn.
Oh, there's so much to say here. Thank you so much, Pam. And R 3.0 is, I think they call it themselves R 3.0, but I think it's R 3.0 when you sort of type it in. I think they're amazing. And I've connected with them through Ben Roberts, I think, probably about a year ago, and I started following them. They have a conference coming in September that's got an online portion, which we can, any of us, of course, can register for. So it's just around the 12th, 13th, I think, of September. There's some really good resources on that site, and I've tapped them and I find them very useful, and I'm volunteering in particular for the governance funding. It's a regenerative funding governance. Like how does grant making and allocation change towards truly regenerative? That's really the focus of this particular one. But what I wanted to alert folks to is what's really interesting about R 3.0 or R 3.0, and they have a very open source, as you say. So it's like we all can get involved, and we all could get involved. Is that they're very much, what I really appreciate about them is that they're very much engaged with the decisions that are being made, particularly in the ESG space and the sustainability space. And Ralph and Bill Bao, who's speaking tomorrow to the Capital Institute, and one of their sessions, which I notice in chat people are talking about, is they're very strong on that particular file. Partly because I think Ralph was one of the early instigators of the global standards GSI, if I've got that right, and a global standards initiative and so they've and Bill was on an advisory for the Science-Based Targets Initiative and has been very disappointed with how it's migrated towards corporate interests, as has ESG. So what I guess my point is, what I really think is kind of neat about them is, like, they're on the front lines, basically. Like, they're writing to the standard setters with points of view. They're backing it up with some of their own work. They are very strong into context-based sustainability, very copacetic with what we talk about here. So I'm a big fan. Bus point. Which is a really important one, Pam, and one I struggle with a lot, is what has to go, what has to be hospiced, and what has to go, and what needs to be created. And I think the way I'm reconciling it, and I realize that
I was going to ask you. I wanted to ask you, how are you reconciling that? Please.
Well, I'll tell you, I think, but this is everyone has to kind of make their own determination here. But for me, I was very persuaded I found very useful the Bill Sharp 3 Horizons framework model, which some of you may know. Daniel Christian Wall also uses it, and a number of regenerative type folks, right? The 3 Horizon framework. So there's business as usual, and then there's the transition, and then there's more thrivable future. And in that business as usual, which is the peak now, and we know it's in a slide, my own, and this is I feel like I'm in a trend. I'm a transition piece. My work is transitioning from business Horizon 1 to the into the Horizon 3, but definitely working with Horizon 1 thinking. And what I get concerned about is I think everybody's on this bus. Everybody has to change. Every institution has to evolve. It's not like you can just build the new. I think we need to have those examples of the regenerative base. Absolutely. They're the most important thing, is to plant those seeds. But when I think about fresh water and safe roads and, safe this and safe, there's so much regulation, and there's so much that holds us in place in terms of the services the infrastructure we have. And so in that H1, this, what do we preserve? How do we take forward the intelligence capital, the spirit, the cultural, the intellectual capital, to make sure that it is available to help us go through? So I definitely see that what I think is true is that the traditional world, it needs to be shaken up. It will be, but they cannot crumble without. We would take so much longer to rebuild, so much, so that we need to convert the best of them into the future. So that's how I reconcile, is that I think we're it's all hands on deck and we each have different roles. And thanks for listening, because that's a bit of a rant.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Dave.
Yeah, so many different things, but I guess I was going to go back, if I could, to the box, the table that you showed in the slides, Pam, and the commons. And one of the things that made me think about is that the commons, as we're talking about, I would argue, are all assets. They're all kind of nouns, right? There's something that has value, and in many ways, I think the issue we're dealing with is kind of the verb, like how did we create the value? What's the human cooperation, right, that led to it? And so I would argue that the market has become our dominant mode, or a very important mode of coordinating human action to create value, right? And we have other modes for creating value, right? We can have a conversation and do something, right? But markets are great because I can buy a TV from Korea and never have a conversation with anybody about it. I still get a TV out of the deal, so there's value in the distributed global markets, but that's not enough value. And so the managing, and so a lot of where we create value, I would argue, is from standards, right? We just have an agreement about stuff, and then it makes it easier to do things. And so if you think about it, language is a standard, and it is in the commons, right? It's not owned by anybody, but it's shared widely, and it is of value, right? And so the alphabet, it's like there's always the guy that started Sun Microsystems used to say, well, what if I could own the letter E, and you had to pay me for access to the letter E, but we don't do that, right? Because that's in the public sphere. But we also use like the size of the head screws, or there's standards kind of everywhere, and those standards help us coordinate better. And so anyway, and business structures also tend to be standards, right? We kind of replicate the pattern. And so what we need, I would argue, are new patterns that allow us to manage commons. And anyway, I don't know, that's my rant. So I'm just.
Well, thank you. No, that's interesting. And we did have mathematics on that list, but not the alphabet. But you're right. It's sort of along the same lines of.
And you definitely get to the licensing, right? Because we do have licensing for the Creative Commons, right? But not everything is being licensed. There's a whole bunch of things that are just out of license. They're in the public sphere. So there's all these layers and kind of machinations that we've created, some of which are to create the scarcity that allows people to make a living to do their commons, right? So we have, that's where patent law and trademarks and stuff come from, is an artificial scarcity, right? That allows people to get paid. So for better word.
Right. And I think that it is the inauthenticity that ultimately is corrosive. That if the truth will set us free, if rigorous honesty is how you have the cleanest life, then our acceptance, our growing acceptance, moving from inauthentic being accepted to now downright lying, left, right, and center being acceptable. And that's why I said the corruption, what I see as corruption or the corrosion, is one of the biggest things that is occurring right now in the lists that are 3.0 created there. And I believe that our language is under reconstruction, and I hope it's moving to a more authentic foundation, because that will be helpful for sure.
Yeah.
Michael,
David.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi, Michael.
I am so sorry I arrived late. I literally arrived there. You had whatever your last slide was just closing. So I couldn't even read what the title, it was something about a question, and I couldn't even get to the question before it closed. So I was going to mostly listen to the conversation, but rather than react to slides, but I realized that was a form of self-censoring that was problematic in a couple ways, and I'll speak to that in just a moment. But if what we're and I don't say that everybody's showing up here in this way, but if it's the living conversation that is the juicy bit, then
Sure.
to self-censor out because one has not become familiarized with the right nouns and objects and mental models and is sometimes one of the ways in which our norms get in the way of, oh, well, I don't know, therefore I won't participate. And this is one of the key things that I'm in a conversation about, like, how do we break our norms in a way that is useful and productive? And it was something David said, but it was already triggered by something you had said even earlier that had this kind of brain moment of insight. And so I'm going to offer an invitation that is completely unformed, but still. So what David said, he reminded me of a presentation I made in this forum a few weeks ago about, the groups. And I some of you may recall that I was like, in economics, there were institutions, there were marketplaces, and that Ostrom's work had been this other kind of collective. But this idea that now we're done, oh, now we have it figured out, is in fact part of the left brain kind of new certainty. Oh, now my certainty is improved. Now I've got it. Now I just have to use these three parts. And the moment he was talking about these collective bodies, I remembered, wait, we've been grouping, right? Groups, like this group is a group. It's a thing that's living, it's doing, and it's not represented in that model either. Part of what 12-step is, and I too share your journey, is as a group that supports the individual transformation into a new state of being oriented to what was a limiting belief, whether it's addiction or something else, but supports the individual transformation into a new group meme that then can be maintained vis-a-vis other groups. And I do think that that's an important collective unit that needs to be distinguished, like Ostrom distinguished the commons. It's like, oh, the learning unit of the group needs to possibly a self-organizing group. How does it welcome its new members, have them evolve through their journey, and support their co-regulation with others? And so an invitation that I was offered recently that I've been feeling a little confronted about how to tackle, and this is what I'm going to invite all of you to join me in. I was invited by, and some of you know this, I was invited by David Slow Wilson, the guy from the pro-social community, to do some coordination with Joe Brewer's Earth Regenerators community and Jeremy Lent, and to do a kind of community weaving thing with the three of them. And part of what I was grappling with was, well, is this an official group to official group to official group? I don't want to do that shit. I mean, I can do that. I've been hired as consultant and I've done that kind of thing. What is your mission statement? How do your projects and deliverables map to? I'm very familiar with all of that. Am credible in doing exactly that kind of thing, but that's not the humaning. That's not the aliveness. That's the institutional co-regulating. And so I've been grappling with, what is it I'm trying to do? What is it that I want to be invited into, that I want to invite others into, that is not that? Could benefit from that, but is not that. And what's become sharpened in part today and in this inquiry with others has been this idea of how to help the self-organizing communities change the communities in which they are in. And so, as you were saying, 12-step, you learn how to not drink, and then you have to negotiate in your family. You have to negotiate with your friends. You have to renegotiate the new you in all of these places. First, you have to learn to do it yourself, and then you have to renegotiate it in all these other places. Well, And that's where the support group of coaching each other. This is how I did it. This is how, and that's like, how do we help each other infect beyond, so each of these groups has their own bucket of knowledge, and how are we helping each other navigate against our workplaces, our from the informal groups, that are considered kind of nice community things. It's like, how is what we're doing now, this living
Right.
conversation? And that's the unit. It is a conversation. How do we weave these conversations into conversations that become institutional? I know I'm kind of going,
Well,
but
let me riff on that.
sure.
The part of the reason that I wanted to bring R3.0 and then weall.org into this conversation is exactly, I'm feeling what I think you're also experiencing the desire for, that's coming to you in the form of consulting. It's like, okay, enough of, what's the next level here? What's the next step up, step in?
Mhm.
And I reached out to Dave Witzel because of this same desires, like, what's the next level? Where do we take this puppy? Because there's so much good, and what is next? And part of my way also is I try not to get ahead of the universe, and I'm in cahoots with the universe, and the universe isn't sending a clear message just yet, but it did send me the message to talk about these other groups next. And then hearing you talk about, there's 3 other groups wanting to come together. I mean, this is coming, and we're helping birth it,
Right.
midwife it, it just by our very actions, by
Right.
just our coming together and putting this energy out, ripples. I genuinely believe it ripples, and that shift is occurring as we speak. So Michael, thank you. I thank you for sharing. I'll be interested to hear how this comes along, and I participate in a couple of those groups, so I'll hear about them, I'm sure. Thank you.
So I will return the mic with one. I will repeat I'll put my email in the I literally am working on a learning sprint that has not just it started with these 3 groups. I'm also a member of R3. I'm a member of We All, and I'm a member of GRC, and I'm intending that this be an invitation, not to everybody. I'm not interested in this going a big thing. I'm interested in people who want to co-prototype a conversation that needs to be sharpened so that it can be then a gift to the world. And so it's not about volume. It's about those who are already, if you have this problem of how do I bring these conversations into new settings, and how do I find the sourcing for myself to become the light I seek in the world as an inter-community actor, so not changing the me, but changing the we, then reach out to me and let's keep that conversation going. So and last thing, so this middle bar right here, it's an oversimplified we, but it's not a me game, it's a we game.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
cheers.
Edie. Good morning.
Hi, all. Thanks. I really enjoyed what I was just hearing there. And the word that comes to mind is like emboldening each other, so that when opportunities come up, we know that we have each other's back when we speak up at a difficult moment, or in a place where we might not otherwise have done that. And I have numerous examples, both in my own life and in the world, of seeing that in action, starting earlier in life with some 12-step groups, just to putting that out there, but also other kinds of support groups formal and informal, that seem like if they meet long enough, they seem like they serve that purpose. And some of the examples that I draw from, not in my world, but in other worlds, is a group of holistic land managers in southeastern Saskatchewan, Canada, who've been meeting for 17, maybe 20 years at this point. It's like 5 families that meet just to talk about what, what's gone well, where are they having trouble, to look at each other's planning. If someone's had an argument with their spouse that morning, they deal with that. If the cows are out, they deal with that. And the kind of closeness and trust that develops over 20 years of those kind of meetings is something that you can't substitute with, I can't remember the words you just used, Michael, but about, what are the kind of official groups or the recognized groups, where it's not the same energy. Another example is in Andhra Pradesh, India, the women's self-help economic groups that have been meeting all over India for 20 years or so. There's a key in both of these examples, and including the 12-step example, that there's a project everyone's engaged in their own way, but as a collective. And so those women's self-help economic groups, everybody's putting in X% of their income into a pool that is sometimes leveraged for larger loans, but sometimes doesn't even need to be. It's just drawn on when somebody in the group has a need. But in talking about their needs and in managing this pool of money, they get to know each other's lives, and they start to see patterns, and then they start to address issues that are more societal or ecological issues. So they then took on regenerative agriculture and have transformed a state in Andhra Pradesh from being mostly brown to being mostly green through the network of these self-help economic groups. Many of those women are smallholder farmers. So, but it keeps going back to the fact that without those relationships, they wouldn't have been emboldened to go to their spouses and their families and say, hey, I want to try this with our land. I want to try stopping using pesticides and using seed treatments and letting go of the GMO contract that we have and taking that risk. And at which point their families very often would fight back, but they knew that the next day they were going back to that group to say, how did it go? Right. And what often those arguments ended with, okay, we'll try it on a piece of the land or half of the land. And then the husbands or families, whatever, would say, well, you were right at the end of the year, and that's how this thing spread. So to me, there's something about the meeting regularly around a project, including credit creation with each other. So getting involved in the way that we have to get involved when there's money involved, which is sticky and close, right? That to me, there's something in there to be learned from that.
Well, maybe it doesn't need to be money. Maybe it can be something else, but it's the commit. There's something in there about a true commitment is what I think. Money.
The reason I say money is because so much of our power is ruled by the fact of where our money is. And, as soon as that money is leaving our community and our network of friends, and we're in debt to Monsanto or to, our Visa card or to whatever, rather than in collaboration with each other financially, our choices are different at that point, and how we settle those debts, et cetera, is different. So I'm actually going to keep money in there. Not that it always needs to be around money. It could be around recovery from addiction. It could be around learning to graze animals holistically, but a real project that involves actual stakes that are real, and it gets it out of the
that's what I was getting at.
Theoretical and mental,
Right. Very cool. Thank you, Dee Dee. Rick.
Thank you. I asked a bit of a flippant question earlier on about what is the value of value. It was sort of tongue in cheek because, economic value has a certain meaning, but value has different meanings. And I have some reservations about focusing too much on economic value as a frame, because it's sort of reductionistic, and it doesn't take in the complexities related to the ethics of what we're doing and how we can visualize a new future. When I say visualize, I'm talking about not creating a vision. I'm talking about how do communities come together in co-creating a vision for their future. So it's not top down. It can be guided from top down, but it's coming from top bottom up. And I put this other question about how can we co-create economic anonymous for recovering neoliberalists to deconstruct the dark side of value. And we get locked into the language of value, and it has multiple meanings, but we don't make good distinction between virtues and values. And I only wish we talked about virtues propositions rather than value propositions. And so I'm just shedding some different perspectives on the conversations, because I don't come from an economic background. I come from the social and health sector. And so my notion of virtues and values are very different from an economic one. And that's where we need multiple perspectives to be able to have cross-disciplinary conversations to see the upsides and downsides of our different perspectives. So I'd just be curious if anybody would like to take a crack at answering that question.
Well, I'd like to ask you to give us an example of what a virtue is, just so I have a better idea of what you're talking about there.
Well, put it very simply, values are, I just did a ChatGPT search on the different definitions of value, but to put it very simply, is defining what is important is one.
That's value.
That's a simple version, and virtue is about doing good. Now, not all values are virtuous. Values can have the good, the bad, and the ugly side to them. So freedom, everyone talks about freedom as though it's a virtue. It's not a virtue, it's a value. Because freedom can be used in a diverse way, from good, bad, and ugly. So if we're not clear on our language and how we use words, then I don't think we can advance things very far if we stuck in the language of values. Does that make sense?
Okay, so virtue is good works, then it's action. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or it can be thought, it can be being, it can be doing, it can be work. It's about doing good. Interesting enough, I was just on a call last night, and somebody was talking about their Buddhist beliefs, and I asked him the question, what do Buddhists mean by winning? Because winning is another word that has a multiplicity of connotations. And while it was conversations, I did a ChatGPT search on that, and it came up with an amazing response. And it was so different to the Western notion of what winning means. And so, if we're going to go deeper into the area of how to create some sort of ethical, spiritual, religious sort of guidance over things, then we need to think about how to mobilize that way to put some parameters about how the economy works for the greater good, for the commons, the common humanity, etc. So I just want to put one last thing. The issue about I mean, there's no question AA is the most powerful self-support movement in the world. No question about it. Self-organized, lots of pluses. On the other hand, I would say there's some limitations of that framework. And that is, if you create a society where people have to bottom out to get better, there might be something wrong with the system.
Well, Rick,
just let me finish.
I want to actually clarify that. it's not a created system where people have to bottom out. People were bottoming out.
Oh, yes, I know exactly. I know that. Yeah.
And so be careful, because that language of saying a system was created where you have to bottom out,
No, I agree. That's my whole
that
point.
does
That's my
not
whole
really
point.
reflect accurately what's going on there.
No, you made my point, actually, if you let me finish, which is
Sure.
we can design systems in ways that actually minimizes addictive behaviors. We live in alcohol and drugs are just one of many. We have addiction. It's focusing on taking our attention a bit. So there's so many, there's a whole panoply of addictive tendencies that take our attention away from doing good work. So the system, the neoliberal system, is designed to take away our attentions to do good work.
Well, I think
So what I'm saying is that if we design systems better, we don't design them that allow so many people to bottom out. We design systems in such a way that they can thrive. So
Okay.
I'm just saying that whatever lens you use, you have to look at the upside and downsides of it. So the economic value lens has a lot of upsides, it's got downsides. AA, upside and downsides. And you have to look at them in a more discerning way to be able to navigate through this morass that we're in at the moment. And how can we visualize a better future?
well,
we're not-
no argument there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Tanuja.
Oh, I was going to say to Rick, rather than upside downside, many of the spiritual traditions, including the Buddhist one, talks about the shadow and the light side. So everything can become dark or light, but also it's not the thing itself. It's the thing as applied to context. A thing applied to context. The same thing. So for example, to give an example of a pill, an aspirin may be the best thing in the world for a headache, but may kill you in some other disease. We tend to look at a thing, a concept or a structure or a ideal or even a value as standing on its own. Nothing stands on its own. Everything is connected to its context. And the dark or the light side of it emerges from the way it connects with its context. It is never the thing itself, never.
All right, a bit of physics to bring us to conclusion. All right, thank you very much. It is time. Another hour has flown by in an amazing way. Thank you all so much for joining us. And next week, we shall continue a similar conversation looking at we all, and then moving into talking about this great, big, gnarly, hairy conversation topic.
That's right. And thank you very much. Thank you for your openness and free-flowing ideas.
Absolutely. Aaron, you're here and right, we're nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Pam. Cheers all. Thank you.
All right. See you next
See you
week,
next week,
everybody.
everybody.